Hi everyone, we're going to do some science today and I'm going to show you how to make lava in a glass. So I'm going to show you a demonstration, and then for the experimental part of things I want you to see how you can take the experiment further or try different things. So what you will need is a glass which you're going to fill with some tap water. 3/4 of your glass is going to be filled with tap water. You're going to need some vegetable oil, type of your choosing. You're going to need some salt, and you're going to need some food colouring. So I'll let you get that together and I'll be back in a sec. So I've prepared my water in my glass. So I've filled it 3/4 full with cold water. So you might want to think about that when you're doing your own experiment and see what things you can change there. So I've got my cold water in there, and then I'm going to add my drops of food colouring. I've gone for red. You might want to think about that as well when you do your experiment. So I'm just going to drop those in. And see that all mixed together. Quite a cool effect whilst that's happening. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my oil and pour that in, and we're going to see what happens when I mix these two substances together. So that's my 1/4 cup, or about 50 or 60 millilitres of oil. I'm using vegetable oil for this experiment. So as I've not poured it in carefully, you can see all the bubbles have formed there. So if you pour it in really gently, you're just going to get a nice bubbleless layer on the top, which is what you want really for doing this experiment. So I'm just going to have to wait a little bit before I move on to the next stage of the experiment. So when you do it, pour it in really carefully and you won't get all these bubbles at the top, and you'll see just a nice layer of oil sat on the top. So when we come back, when my bubbles have disappeared, I will talk you through why that's happened and why we have a layer of oil sat on top of our water. So I've waited a couple of minutes for my bubbles to pop and for the oil to settle into a nice clear layer. As you can see, there are still a few bubbles in my oil layer, but that doesn't really matter. So what I'm going to do now is just explain why this is happening. However, this might be a good point for you to stop the video and have a think about why it's happening yourself. So why do you think the oil is floating on top of the water like this? Do you think that might be different if there isn't a food colouring in there? How could you find that out? So maybe pause the video now and just have a think about why that oil is sat on top of the water. Okay, so now I'm going to explain. So this experiment is all about density. So oil is less dense than water, and that means that molecules in oil are not as close together as they are in water. So the water, all the molecules are really close together, and it pushes through the oil and down. You might want to think about the water, instead of being more dense, think about it being heavier. So that's why the water is going to push through the oil, or the oil is going to float through the top, and you get this separation of the two substances. So what we're going to do now is the cool part of the experiment. So I've got my teaspoon of salt, which I'm just going to plonk in to my glass of oil and water, and we're going to see what happens. So I'll lift this up and show you what happens to my glass when I add this salt. So as you can see, as I've added the salt, we've got these bubbles coming up and down. And the reason that that is occurring is, well, this is another point where you could pause the video and have a think about why that might be happening, just before I explain it in a moment. So when you add the salt to this mixture, the salt is more dense than the oil, so it's going to sink to the bottom, and as it sinks to the bottom, it takes some of that oil with it. And as what you might remember from some of your past experiments, is that when salt is mixed with water, it dissolves. So when that salt and the oil gets to the bottom, the salt dissolves, and as the oil is lighter, or less dense than water, it's going to rise to the top. So you get this effect of it cycling round and round. So that is my demonstration of what happens when you mix oil, water, salt and some food colouring, and it produces this lava lamp effect. And now I would like you to do some experimentation. So I would like you to look at some different things. I've made some suggestions, but you might come up with your own. How much salt can you keep adding before the effect of this lava lamp-like effect stops happening? Does it work differently with different types of oil? So if you have some different oils in your house, does that work differently? We've talked about the temperature of the water. Does that affect it? And what other substances could you try? So try this experiment in as many different ways as you can and think about how you can record your results. It'd be great to see any pictures or videos, or just you could write down some of your ideas and send them back. It'd be brilliant to see your ideas, and we absolutely love it when you share them. Hope you have fun trying this experiment.